There's one thing that's pretty obvious about games this year, is that they're getting absurdly expensive. From Nintendo planning to ask a whopping $90 for some of their titles, because of quality reasons of course, and totally not greed or anything like that. And let's not forget about Microsoft increasing the prices for their consoles to even their games by so much that it should be illegal. Stop! Who in God's name would pay $100+ extra for a console that was released 5 years ago? And don't even get me started on them increasing the prices of their games from $70 to $80. I swear, wasn't the price of games just increased to $70? How is it that these massive companies, whom happen to have the highest profit margins, are always the ones to push the average price of all games in a direction that's unaffordable for the consumer? Don't these soulless conglomerates have any shame whatsoever? Corporate greed has completely taken over the gaming industry. Back in my day, games were made by nerds who had passions and dreams, and they wanted to share these things with like-minded individuals. But who are the people who make games now? It's a glorified hive mind of depressed wages whose job is doomed to go extinct any year now because of AI. And these people are completely under dominion by a smaller but more powerful hive mind of sociopathic old men in suits whose number one goal is to exploit and manipulate the worker and the consumer in order to extract as much currency as possible out of them so that they can indulge themselves with the pleasantries that only a percentage of humans have the privilege to enjoy. Is it really any surprise that most of the greatest games that came out this year were made by a small team and not by a soulless conglomerate? It's because massive companies are completely out of touch to the point of delusion. They think the things that make a game good are to enforce arbitrary things like forced diversity, overdone advertising, and appealing to a liberal ideology that affects the writing in almost a cannibalistic way. But in reality, this is not what accounts for even 1% of what a good game is. In fact, I'd argue that it simply makes the game much worse. But despite all these many plights, major companies still for some reason are stupid enough to price their games at $80+, and they honestly think people are going to be okay with that. It's utterly insane. Does the greed of massive companies have no bounds? I assure you, the only thing that this is going to do, it's going to cause most people to choose the free option when it comes to acquiring games. You know what I'm talking about. Piracy, which is pretty much mandatory for anyone who isn't rich in 2025. Can you imagine going to your hard job every day, breaking your back so the people who are higher up on the capitalistic pyramid scheme can line their pockets with your own blood, sweat, and tears, and then going back to spend your limited free time to sit back and try out a game that looks interesting, only to pay for it with the entirety of the money generated from your full day at work, handing it over to another gang of rich people? Fuck that. Why would anyone in their right mind subsidize a bunch of elites who hate them and only sees them as dollar signs? And like I said earlier, the ones who are typically the most egregious when it comes to these price changes, which only aren't known as price fixing because of the money that are shoved into the pockets of politicians. These companies are always the ones who make the most revenue, have the most influence, have the broadest profit margins, and are worth the most money. Now, this is surely because of chance, and not a bunch of monopolies that's held up by creating false value by brainwashing consumers into thinking the slop is worth spending our hard-earned capital on. Of course, not every game company is like this, and the ones who aren't deserve every penny that they earn, because they earn it through merit and not manipulation, nor disgusting business tactics. But it's no surprise that the good ones are often independent companies like in the case of Larian, or they happen to be indie studios who rarely have enough staff to count on one hand. And yet, these games are often perceived as higher quality, despite their obvious lack of staff, funds, material, advertising, and pretty much every quote-unquote advantage that these massive companies leverage in their supposed favor. When one of these indie games are fun, they simply gain notoriety by word of mouth alone, the only type of advertising that should matter. On top of that, these games are significantly cheaper too, while maintaining substance. And when indie devs lack funding for games that are built on solid concepts, we've seen numerous occasions when the community is more than willing to come in and fill in the gaps, not because of trust alone, but because of the genuine desire that people have for games that are made by gamers. None of this oversaturated corporate slop that's constantly being shoved down our throats at every turn. It's enough that we have to see this bullshit at work, let alone in our games that are meant for our enjoyment. And this is precisely why companies like Nintendo and Microsoft simply don't have the option to increase their prices, because indie games have only gotten better in the last couple of years. In the future, I think it's safe to expect that indie games are going to humble these massive companies, and it's exactly what these fucks deserve for their delusional corporate greed. At the end of the day, no one with a working brain is going to willingly pay money for a product that's only getting worse over time. But people are more than willing to pay for a VPN and a virus scan program so that they could be greeted by a happy-looking girl with a spoon, and free games that for some strange reason require much less storage. Finally, we're able to have more than 5 games on our PC at one time, and the fact that it's just one person that's doing the job that a whole battalion of seasoned devs are unable to manage for some reason. But of course, the greed-stricken entity could give a rat's ass about the fluffed up mess of 150 gigabytes on your hard drive. In fact, who knows, maybe they have some stake in storage futures. I sure as shit wouldn't be surprised. So let me just get this straight. The content of these products have gotten worse over time. The amount of worthless political shoehorning has been rampant. The people at the top of these companies are only making more and more money. The price of these products have increased to levels that are unaffordable to the populace of people who are working paycheck to paycheck. Now, I'm no mathematician, but even a CEO with Down syndrome could see that this shit is obviously going to lead to less people buying AAA games and instead moving towards indie games and even pirating AAA games to get the better version of the product for free. How do companies not understand that pirating is inevitable? Because they've made it inevitable. There are tons and tons of people who pool together to send money to repackers and crackers every single day because people are fed up with this corporate greed that's constantly affecting our games. These great people who spend large portions of their day to send a humongous middle finger to companies like Nintendo are the Robin Hoods of our generation. They steal from the barons and give to the peasants, and they deserve the utmost respect for their DRM destroying efforts. I wonder if there's ever going to be a future where these massive entities who have bought up almost all of our beloved game studios and turned them into slot factories will ever wake up and stop being so delusional. But if you read articles on what these CEOs actually think, like in the case of Ubisoft, then you'd know that there is a greater chance of Dreamy Bull becoming the president of the United States. Regardless, greed, corruption, manipulation, all tools that are used by massive enterprises that pretend like they're your friend, pretend that they have your best interest at heart. These imposters, who are more akin to the devil than your friend, should get nothing from you. Absolutely nothing. Zero, zilch, nada. Because they don't have your own interest at heart. If they had the option to legally kidnap you and sell your organs, they would invest in that in a heartbeat. And so, we should strive to use our hard-earned money on people who've earned it, like the many indie devs who are hard at work each day, to create something that's meant for us just as much as it's meant for them. And let's not forget about the modern Robin Hoods of today. They make playing a $20 game that's marked as an $80 game, something that's accessible for free all around the globe. And yeah, that's the video. Fuck Nintendo, Ubisoft, and Microsoft. And I'm outta here. Later.